Hello, everybody. What's up? So today we need to have a talk about politics in Star Wars. And to do so, since I hate the new Battlefront, the 2015 Star Wars Battlefront, and that's the only Star Wars game I have in my Xbox One, I'm gonna do the space stuff in Halo 4 for stock footage. So, this would be mostly in response to things George Lucas has said previously, like a couple days ago on James Cameron's new show about science fiction on AMC or A&E. Can't remember what it is, but politics. It's no secret that politics has been a part of science fiction for a very long time. That a lot of people have used science fiction to push social issues, even though a lot of people may not see anything very political about those works. Like for me, I never really thought that the original Star Wars as a kid was very political. As I started growing up, I started to realize that Star Wars was actually pretty political. Like, the Empire, big government, basically trying to kill you and stuff like that. It kind of gets to you. And in some ways, politics can ruin a person's perception of a work that they enjoy. That's what kind of messed up the original Starship Troopers for me, because it was just, the politics for that movie were just kind of ridiculous. And I made an entire video on that one. So, this is also going to lead into a discussion on The Last Jedi's politics and how so many people just absolutely hate it. Even if they agree with it, they think the politics are freaking dumb. And the way that it was pushed through was freaking dumb. So, anyway, apparently Richard Nixon is the Senate. And I just want to make a distinction here, alright? Because it's no secret that a lot of people in Hollywood, after Richard Nixon was, ousted, they were banking on Richard Nixon. Like, a lot of people made movies about it. Escape from New York was a story based, but not based, but John Carpenter's Escape from New York was basically a response to Nixon's removal from office and stuff like that. Well, not really removal, he resigned from office. And George Lucas made Richard Nixon basically Chancellor Palpatine. He said that he had based a lot of what happened to Richard Nixon and what he did in the last couple of years of his presidency as really the basis for comparison to Chancellor Palpatine, and how Palpatine mirrored his rise to power and stuff like that, which I find a little bit hard to believe. I don't doubt that's the analogy you're trying to make, but as far as Richard Nixon being exactly like Chancellor Palpatine and trying to be this huge this power grabber, I find it a little ridiculous. Alright, and I'm not trying to make excuses for Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was an asshole. Alright, but Lucas said a quote like this. He said that, I don't have the exact quote here, so go on a limb here. He basically said that Nixon circumvented the Senate and basically became nearly a huge tyrant, and he did it all under the guise that he was a nice guy. And Palpatine in the movies, in the prequels, was very nice to a couple people. It was a nice guy. If you were going in there blind, you would thinking, what is there really to really hate about this guy? Well, there's a problem with that. Nixon has been very vehemently described in historical texts and documents that he was a major asshole. Like, major asshole, not just in the Spaceballs way, but major. He was a dick. There's a reason people called him Dick in the White House, and it wasn't because his name was Dick Nixon, basically. He was a dick. Alright, and doing what he did at Watergate, that was a pretty big dick move, too. But Nixon was not a nice guy, and he was not documented to be a nice guy. He may have been a nice guy when he was talking to the public. Of course, all presidents are, except for Donald Trump. But, yeah, so it's just, every president's going to be a nice guy in order to keep up appearances. So this thing is saying that Richard Nixon was grabbing power under the guise that he was being a nice man. Like I said, I find that extremely hard to believe. That is a major stretch, right? And like I said, he did a lot of shit. He attacked freedom of the press. He attacked freedom of speech. But when you look at the overall damage he did, it wasn't really that much. I mean, he did a lot of stuff with the Constitution that I think were pretty egregious, like executive privilege. I mean, that's kind of stupid. I don't think executive privilege is a thing. Alright, just looking at it from a law point perspective, there's nothing that the president should be able to... There's nothing that the president should not... Nothing that the president should not be able to be looked at by other members of, like, Congress or the Supreme Court. And Nixon kind of tried to screw that up a little bit. He was basically trying to cover up stuff in Watergate and stuff like that. But there's a reason that Nixon was liked before Watergate, and it was because he got America out of the Vietnam War. That's literally the whole reason, alright? It's got to be important to distinguish the differences between Palpatine and Nixon. Nixon got us out of a war, and no matter how controversial he did that, he still got us out of the war, and that's what a lot of people wanted. A lot of people didn't really care about Nixon personally. They just wanted out of the war and getting America out of the war in that time frame. That was a very high priority on so many people's political list, and that's what got a lot of people popular back then. So Palpatine actually drug people into a war because people were, they were separating from the Republic. And in doing so, use the War Powers Act, like we would in the United States, to basically extend, not only, that's more like a FDR comparison, because Roosevelt used the War Powers to extend his term to like four terms. He served 4 terms as the president of the United States. Four terms. Alright, and that's unprecedented. He's the only president to serve any more than 2 terms. And he's the only president, and I hope to God that's how it stays. That no other president should serve that much. Alright, Nixon, like I said, Nixon, he had a lot of faults. Like I said, he was an asshole. He deserved a lot of the criticism he got later on in his presidency and later on in his life. But he is not a tyrant. He was not a tyrant. He was no more a tyrant than Abraham Lincoln, who suspended habeas corpus. Okay, and I like Abraham Lincoln a lot. I think Abraham Lincoln was a pretty good guy. But for the love of God, he was not I don't see Abraham Lincoln as a tyrant. I don't see Richard Nixon as a tyrant. Alright, he did stuff that was tyrant-y, but then again, Donald Trump did stuff that's tyrant-y. So did Barack Obama. Bombing countries without orders, but without permission from Congress. I mean, that's pretty bad. Alright, but that's something that a lot of presidents have done ever since, World War II. And Woodrow Wilson kind of did some stuff before World War I, using the military to his whipping boy. Though it was the Chase Pancho Villa, so I guess you can forgive that. But, I mean, there's a lot of people who've done a lot more worse things than Richard Nixon. Okay, and considering that, the last presidential administration, kind of, tried to silence conservatives by, targeting finances through the IRS. Yes, that is a real thing. Look it up. The IRS scandal was very major. And the only reason it wasn't covered like it should have been in the media is because the media didn't give a shit. Okay, now I don't regard President Obama as a tyrant, alright? Not as much as I did when I first saw him as a president. Because when I was a kid, I did not like him. He was a douche. I wanted to one of my fondest memories as a child of looking into politics was the fact that I was one of those few people who just looked at Barack Obama and thought he was an asshole. Like, I did not like the guy. Like, the way he spoke, it just never fit well with me. He was always saying shit. It's like he was trying to spread gossip intentionally in order to do something. Or he was trying to do like what Lyndon B. Johnson did to win seats in his political career. He would spread falsehoods about his political opponents, and then he would win. Alright, and he would do it so well that, I mean, that's kind of what he was known for. Alright, but Richard Nixon, like I said, there's a lot of things I thought Richard Nixon did wrong in his presidency. Okay, he was an asshole, but he was not the biggest asshole in regards to a lot of things done during a president of the United States' tenure. Alright, it just isn't as bad as a lot of people believe. Alright, and like a lot of people during like when the American public is infused to, politics as they were back in the 70s, as they are now, or at least since 2008, and it gets a little scary. It just gets a little weird. And so, so like I said, just to let you know, I mean, I did not do a lot of research on this. This is just coming from my historical knowledge, and I might be wrong on a couple of these things. Alright, but the big difference between Palpatine and Richard Nixon was the fact that what Richard Nixon did ended up leading to the downfall of his presidency, and ended up causing him to resign from office. Whereas Chancellor Palpatine seized the reins of power and stayed in office. Okay, so all those people who were calling Nixon a tyrant, he resigned. He resigned voluntarily. Alright, he saw what was going on, and he decided, I'm done. Alright, and Gerald Ford wasn't the most perfect president, but for a 3-year president, he was a pretty good guy. He had good morals. I mean, the guys, and Gerald Ford, I mean, I'm going to go on a little tangent about that one, but Gerald Ford, I mean, he stood on the steps of Congress. Not steps of Congress. He was in Congress. He was begging the Senate to let them send people into Vietnam to help with the evacuation of the citizens from Saigon, and we didn't do shit. Alright, the only people we could evacuate there were the embassy people. Like, those images of the people who were hanging on the side of the helicopter. I mean, that shit was pretty crazy. So, I mean, there was a lot of things that came of Richard Nixon's presidency, but if anything, it just caused more presidents to become more tyrannical. Okay, the only thing that the president of the United States' power, the only thing out of the president's power set that has been really rebuked by Congress has been term limits. Like, that's the only thing that's really been stripped away from him. Is the limiting of term limits is one of the greatest things ever to happen in law, especially after FDR served 4 terms. But that's really the only real thing of significance that's been limited by Congress onto the president. So anyway, out of Nixon now, we shall now go into the politics of The Last Jedi. And I know I've been kind of talking about The Last Jedi for a while. I mean, I've had the movie for a month now, and I still haven't made a video on it at all. And I will soon, but there's a lot of things wrong with the politics of The Last Jedi. Like, there's just a lot of things that just morally, there's just a lot of moral ambiguity and so many things that is just like not only poorly written but poorly executed at the same time. Of course, you can have both of those. So, basically, the whole movie just seems like one big diversity quota. That's really That's really a lot of what it is just a big diversity quota. Like, they'll have characters who serve absolutely no real purpose to the plot once you get down to it, or at least once you look at it critically at the end. There's like no real reason for this character to be there. Like Maz Kanata, she comes in for 2 seconds and talks about code breakers and a union dispute, and that's it. And then she disappears from the film, and she's played by like a Kenyan person. Alright, and I'm not saying that we can't have people from Kenya playing certain characters. Alright, you take that out of context and beat you up. But I mean, she's only there for like 2 seconds. And top that off with the promotion of The Last Jedi with like Daisy Ridley saying that anyone can have the Force, which is ludicrous if you look at the established Star Wars lore. Alright, and I like Daisy Ridley, but I mean, she said some pretty crappy things when it came to Star Wars and how, you know, the lore. Alright, and one of the big problems with The Last Jedi is how much it fucks with the established lore of Star Wars. Alright, you can praise it for being different all you want, but they did some really stupid shit. Mainly killing Luke Skywalker, which is another thing. One of the big things, yeah, it's like I said, one of the big things is that it's just a big diversity quota. Rose is probably one of the most useless characters of all time. She was there just to pad out the running time and to virtue signal about animal cruelty and stuff. Alright, and that whole sequence with Canto Bight, that is by far one of the most useless sequences in film. It is. It's just like basically the whole sequence of events is Finn and Rose go there for a codebreaker, get arrested for a parking violation, free a couple of animals, and leave a bunch of slave kids there to, you know, get beatings after all that stuff happened. Which is like, and then they ended up finding a codebreaker anyway in a jail cell who was a drunkard who happened to be able to do everything that the codebreaker they were looking for could do. Which, I'm like, okay. And then once they, you know, get the whole thing, you find out it's all useless anyway because the thing that they're trying to break into is like they get there and then nothing comes of it. Like, they never take down the tracker or anything like that. So it's just like, it's all useless. And top that off, it really conflicted with a lot of the stuff in the in Poe's, you know, story arc. How he was trying to, you know, find a way to keep the Resistance alive long enough to get help. And, you know, Holdo was being a retarded cunt. Alright, and it's just a lot of problems there. And like I said, in Holdo, she looked like basically your stereotypical third wave feminist, which is pretty funny to me and a lot of people. And, you know, wearing a ball gown to a fucking fight. I mean, unless you're Ruby Rose, I mean, you can't really pull that off. So, yeah. And I don't mean the lesbian Ruby Rose. I mean the Ruby Rose from Ruby. Important to clarify that. I don't even know if Ruby Rose has been in an action movie where she was fighting people in a ball gown. But yeah, so there's that. And, you know, like I just said, animal cruelty and stuff on the Canto Bight section. Capitalism is evil. The only evil people are rich white men, or just white men. If you look at the First Order, there's like no black. there's no diverse sect of people. Like, Finn was like the only stormtrooper who was ever captured that was black, and I think maybe there was like two black people that was working for the First Order in The Force Awakens, and that was it. And they both died on a death planet. But like, and this is like everybody's rich white man, or you're an arrogant white man, or something like that, and it was just really fucking annoying. Rape. And so the politics, it's really pushing this intersectionality bullshit along with almost every leftist punching point that you can think of, alright? And if you've watched my channel for a while, you'll know, hey, I'm not a big fan of, you know, internet lefties, or lefties in general, if they're being retarded about it. Like, there's some people on the left that I like Jake Tapper. Mindless Entertainment does a yeah, Jesse from Mindless Entertainment does a lot of good videos on like feminism and like how feminism changed in Star Wars. And I'll leave links for that in the description if I remember. Motherfucking binary rifle. Or was that a incineration cannon? But anyway, like I said, there's just a lot wrong with it, and a lot of it I think has to do with Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams. Alright, there's a lot of stuff I blame J.J. Abrams for in The Force Awakens. Mostly about, you know, how it was basically a big missed opportunity to have Han, Luke, and Leia in the same place on screen for one last go. Now we were lucky enough to get Luke and Leia one last scene together before Carrie Fisher died. So it wasn't a total waste, but you wasted an opportunity to get Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Princess Leia on screen for one last go. Which is pretty disappointing as a fan of the original trilogy, as something that I grew up watching in my childhood. It was pretty disappointing to not see all of them on screen. Alright, and J.J. Abrams, you know, kind of justified this by saying that there's so many, you look at the Oscars, that there's so many white people at the Oscars. And, you know, he wanted to do something different. And he wanted to employ a diverse cast. Well, you can do that, but don't fuck with the originals. Alright, I mean, for all the Force Awakens flaws, it was an enjoyable movie to watch for the first couple of times, but it does age incredibly bad. And that's one of my big problems with that movie, is the fact that it ages so terribly. If you not only look at it critically, but look at it as a fan of the original trilogy. So, it's just really frustrating, and like I said, a lot of that has to do with J.J. Abrams, but Kathleen Kennedy has been the most outrageous cunt of all time. Oh yeah, and if you're listening to this, Disney, suck a dick, I don't care. Alright, I'll call your employees cunts. Because, I mean, she really is. She's an asshole. She's a misleading liar and a hypocrite. Like, she said that The Last Jedi would focus a lot on, you know, Luke as a character, is that he would be so super important in this film. He's an old hermit for, like, the entire film. His character is assassinated by making him basically turn into the heroic old guy who turns out to be such an asshole. And then, you know, and then they made him, and then they did the most egregious thing of all, is make him a nephew-killing asshole. And they're just like, what? Alright, as a fan of the original trilogy, I found no way that is good. Alright, like Luke's treatment all you want, like how well Mark Hamill acted all you want, but goddamn. I've seen, there was no build up to this. All you get is Luke Skywalker is an old grumpy hermit, and he's a retard who doesn't know anything about the Force and raised better than him in every single way. And that also feeds into the politics of letting the past die, and that we shouldn't look to the past so fervently, and that everything in the past was bad, and we should kill it, which is retarded. So anyway, it's about 24 minutes on this one. God damn it. Alrighty. I'm going to go ahead and end this one. I will continue this one in another video. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoy. Don't die.